Thanks for joining us today. Have you ever wondered why Jesus said, "No one knows the day or the hour, not even the Son"? Does this mean Jesus wasn't all-knowing, or that he's somehow less than God? In this video, we'll explore what Jesus meant, what this reveals about his divine and human nature, and how this one statement has sparked centuries of theological debate. Stay tuned as we dig into the scriptures and uncover the truth behind this mysterious verse. Before we continue, please remember to subscribe, like, and share. The primary text in question states, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone." Matthew 24, verse 36. Let's consider the context of this difficult verse as part of the Olivet Discourse, in which Jesus talks about the destruction of Jerusalem and his second coming. In verses 29 to 31, he focuses on the heavenly signs preceding his parousia and on his coming. With the parable of the fig tree and the following admonition, Matthew 24, 32 and 33, Jesus returns to the issue of the destruction of Jerusalem and encourages his disciples to observe the signs of the times and to understand the nearness of this terrible event. The generation that will not pass away until all these things have happened, Matthew 24, verse 34, would be the first century generation that has known Jesus and would experience the fall of Jerusalem. The passage, beginning with verse 36, returns to the second coming. Clearly the parousia, Matthew 24, 39, and the coming, erchomai, of the Lord or the Son of Man, Matthew 24, verses 42 and 44 are mentioned. Verse 36, a kind of introduction to verses 37 to 51, focuses on the fact that a date for the second coming cannot be known. This passage deals with the eschatological ignorance and the necessity of being ready and prepared because of this unknown date. Throughout the passages, the theme knowing is found. According to verses 32 and 33, the disciples should know, or ginosko, about the nearness of the predicted event. In Matthew 24, verses 36 to 51, the stress is on not knowing. Verses 36 to 51 clearly emphasize that although signs may indicate the nearness of the second coming, this event cannot be calculated. If even the angels and Jesus himself do not know the precise date, how much less would the disciples know? Instead of computing the parousia, they should always be ready. Thus the focus centers not so much on the nature of Christ, but on the preparedness of humans for the most climactic event of world history. Matthew 25, with the parables of the 10 virgins, the talents, and the sheep and goats, continues this thought. We should recognize the importance of being ready when Jesus comes to enjoy the wedding banquet. In these parables, Jesus also indicates that there will be a delay, an interim between his first and second coming. In addition, the last two parables show that it is not enough to wait passively. Those who truly wait are actively involved in some work for the Master, and they serve others. Let's analyze the text. The Greek manuscripts contain various readings of Matthew 24, 36. The most important one seems to be the omission of the phrase, "nor the Son" in the majority text, and some other manuscripts and versions, while well attested in some earlier manuscripts. We find it quite likely that in some manuscripts the phrase "nor the Son" was dropped due to theological considerations, namely, the question of how the concept of the Trinity would fit with such an amazing statement. However, no matter which reading one prefers, in each case, the Father alone knows the date of the second coming of Jesus. Whether or not the phrase "nor the Son" is included does not make much of a difference, but is automatically implied. As an analysis of the context shows, that day and hour undoubtedly refers to Christ's second coming. According to verse 36, the date of this coming remains unknown. Day and hour tie down a time, says, together the day and the hour identify the time. The terms day and hour are repeated in the next verses. There are the days of Noah, verses 37 and 38, and the day when Noah went into the ark, verse 38. In verse 42, the day of the Lord's coming, and in verse 44, the hour of the coming of the Son of Man appear. Obviously, the terms here are used almost as synonyms and are joined again in verse 50 to describe the second coming. Although not mentioning day and hour, verse 48 contains the problem of a delay. So the importance of the parousia and the disciples' readiness are underlined, and any attempt to calculate the event is rejected. Three groups do not know the time. First, all humans. Second, the angels in heaven who are close to God and the heavenly council. And third, the Son. Only God the Father knows the date of the parousia. Though most modern interpreters take the text at face value and are willing to talk about limitations for Jesus, ancient interpreters came up with a variety of suggestions concerning the ignorance of Jesus. Origen wondered whether Jesus was referring to the church of which he is the head. Philoxenus asserted that Jesus became one with the Father in wisdom and authority only after his ascension. Ambrose attributed "nor the Son" to an Arian interpolation. Athanasius suggested that Jesus only feigned ignorance. The Cappadocians thought that the Son did not know the date on his own, but only through the Father. Chrysostom simply denied that Jesus was ignorant of anything. Others suggest that Jesus did not use the term Son as a self-designation. However, the text is quite clear and shows that Jesus admits openly and frankly that he has limited knowledge in this situation. This also indicates submission to the Father. Yet the sequence of groups from humans to angels to Jesus may indicate a progression. Jesus lives the closest to the Father, even if at the time he spoke these words he did not know the exact timing of his second coming. The question is, does Jesus' limited knowledge militate against his divinity and his place within the Trinity? We do not think so. Although Jesus did not know the exact time of his coming, he knew many other details. Matthew 24-25 reveals that around 31 AD, Jesus knew the future destruction of Jerusalem and his own coming. He knew that some time would pass between the fall of Jerusalem and the final consummation, and between his first and second comings, filling in for us many details about earthly and heavenly signs and religious confrontations. For instance, in Matthew 25, verse 19, he mentions a long time. These chapters are foundational to New Testament eschatology. In addition, Jesus knew about the future persecution of his people, Matthew 10, verse 18, his own suffering, Matthew 16, verse 21, etc., and betrayal, Matthew 26, verse 34, the final judgment, Matthew 10, verse 15, etc., reward, Matthew 19, verse 29, and his future glory, Matthew 16, verse 27. But his knowledge was not limited to the future. He knew the Father and revealed him to whom he wanted, Matthew 11, verse 27. He also knew the thoughts of his audience, Matthew 9, verse 4. This knowledge surpassed that of all other human beings and obviously had to do with his divinity. Yet there were a few elements that were excluded from his omniscience. Matthew 24, verse 36 is the clearest statement in the New Testament of a limitation of Jesus' knowledge. Nevertheless, one must keep in mind that Jesus knew God, humanity, and the future in a very detailed way, even if he did not know everything. While the Gospel of John stresses Jesus' divinity the strongest and contains remarkable statements in this respect, the Gospel of Matthew is not devoid of statements pointing to Jesus' divinity. Jesus is the Lord Yahweh, Matthew 3, verse 3, Isaiah 40, verse 3. The Son of Man is able to forgive sins, and that is a privilege of the deity, Matthew 9, verse 6. He sends out prophets, a divine activity, Matthew 23, verses 34-36. Jesus is David's son, and yet also his Lord, Matthew 22, verses 45. All authority is given to Jesus, so he is omnipotent, Matthew 28, verse 18, and also omnipresent, Matthew 28, verse 20. He is also part of the Trinity, who shares one common name, Matthew 28, verse 19. So in Matthew, Jesus is both God and the one whose knowledge is somewhat limited. Therefore, when discussing Jesus' limited knowledge, one should not deny that he is God. One cannot and should not give up one truth for the other. The Bible knows a number of paradoxes, and here it looks as if we have another one. Both paradoxical statements are true and must be maintained. Jesus differs from God the Father and the Holy Spirit in spite of being part of the Trinity by the facts that he is fully human and fully God, and that he has retained these two natures after his incarnation. Sure, his human nature is now a glorified resurrection nature. Matthew makes it clear that Jesus is a real human being, though conceived by the Holy Spirit. He accomplishes this revelation by integrating Jesus in the genealogy of Matthew 1 and mentioning his birth. Because Jesus was fully human, he became hungry as we do, Matthew 4, verse 2. He needed to drink, Matthew 27, verse 48, rest, Matthew 8, verse 20, sleep, Matthew 8, verse 24, and have some kind of home, Matthew 13, verse 36. He was also tempted by Satan, Matthew 4, verses 1 to 11. As a social being, he had fellowship with others, Matthew 9, verse 10 and 11. He felt compassion for his people, Matthew 9, verse 36, etc. He prayed to God the Father, Matthew 14, verse 23, and sang, Matthew 26, verse 30. He felt disappointed, Matthew 17, verse 17. Deeply grieved to the point of death, Matthew 26, verse 38. Left without emotional support from his disciples, Matthew 26, verse 42 and 45. Drained and deserted by God, Matthew 27, verse 46. Finally he died, Matthew 17, verse 23, 27, verse 50. As a human being, subject to physical, emotional, and mental needs and participating in the frailty of humanity, Jesus had temporarily emptied himself of certain divine prerogatives, Philippians 2, verses 6 to 8, Matthew 20, verse 23, and became subordinate to the Father who had sent him, Matthew 10, verse 40, 15, verse 24. So, as a human being, Jesus was limited in various ways. Our text, Matthew 24, verse 36, suggests that Jesus' omniscience was limited. Reading through the Gospel, we also notice that Jesus' omnipresence was limited but affirmed at the end of the Gospel, namely after his resurrection, Matthew 28, verse 20. The same seems to be true for his omnipotence, Matthew 26, verse 53. Osborne writes, Jesus is the God-man and as such is both fully God and fully human. This involves limitations when in his incarnate state. When walking planet Earth, he was not omnipresent and limited himself in his omnipotence and his omniscience. Robert Mounce points out that as the omnipotence of the Son did not come into play in the temptation scene, 4 verses 1 to 11, now his omniscience is veiled in a specific area. Commentators explain that the ignorance on Jesus' part during his incarnation should be seen positively, namely as evidence of his genuine humanity. Additionally, in limiting his knowledge to the event of his second coming, there is a key benefit to us. That is, if he was privy and revealed that time, most, if not all, would wait until then to be ready for his appearance instead of being ready now. In conclusion, Matthew 24:36, a difficult verse that mentions Jesus' ignorance with regard to the date of his coming, was spoken during his incarnation as a human being, and this needs to be understood from this perspective. The Gospel of Matthew stresses both Jesus' divinity and humanity, even for the time when he lived on earth. But it shows that due to the incarnation, certain limitations in Jesus' life existed that were removed after his resurrection. Matthew 28, verses 18 and 19. Therefore, the text cannot be used to either deny Jesus' divinity or exclude him from the Trinity. Yet this observation does not seem to be the main point of the argument anyway. The focus of Matthew 24 verses 36 to 51 is on the unknown date of the second coming and on our reaction to it. If this date was not known to Jesus, we should not attempt to calculate it. Rather, we should live constantly in a state of readiness, expecting with great anticipation and joy Christ's second coming. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please subscribe, like and share.